right? And then, okay.
How can you determine if a lipstick or a lip balm or toothpaste or mouth has gluten in it?
The question is how to determine whether the lipsticks or toothpaste, all these cosmetic products have gluten or not. There are two ways. By law, manufacturer should disclose whether there's a limit, whether there's a gluten or not. And right now, the limit for gluten is 20 million per particle, 20 particles per million. So if the product has less than 20 particles of gluten per million, the product can be labeled as a gluten-free. If the product has more than 20 particles per million, by law, it cannot be labeled as gluten-free, right? So, and typically, if you call the manufacturer, you can get a decent answer because it's a legal issue. Second, there are several labs in the country which perform specific testing. You can send them your materials and they can test it for you. It's expensive, but let's say if you love a brand of toothpaste or kind of cosmetic product and you're not sure whether it's gluten-free or not, you can send the product to the lab and it'll be tested. Yes?
Which nationalities are most predisposed to gluten intolerance?
So the question is which nationality is most predisposed? If you look at the literature, so typically the Italians and Irish people have the highest penetration of the gene. Next.
Can you like maybe a 90% improvement on gluten? So like instead of down eating pasta and maybe low, Italian breads and stuff like that. How about if you eliminated the pasta and those when it's in your soy sauces? Do you get?
So the question is whether partial gluten-free diet helps. The answer is no. So it's like get really pregnant. No, you're either pregnant or not pregnant. So right. So it's the same thing. Yes.
Along that same line, if you're following a strict gluten-free diet, you happen to get gluten, and you eat it, are you doing any irreversible damage? Is that going to lead to something more severe symptoms, so long as you go right back to having a gluten-free diet and follow a strict regimen?
You're not doing any irreversible damage, but again, if you're really gluten intolerant, you'll feel it.
Yeah.
So, and again, it all depends how much gluten you consume. So, as I said before, that there's a very strong dose effect. So if you consume a small amount, typically you'll be dealing with fatigue somewhere between 6 to 24 hours, right? So I have patients, couple of patients who develop a major problem after consumption of small amount of gluten. But again, it depends on a number of different things. It depends how stable your gut microflora is, because if you're dealing with leaky gut syndrome and you can consume gluten, it can start a whole chain of events, which eventually can cause, let's say, colitis or flare-up of lupus or things like that. But in majority of patients, there's not too much damage can be done by accidental consumption of gluten.
Okay.
You'll feel it, but nothing else. Yes?
Is it important to find out if you are celiac or not? I know I'm gluten intolerant, but I haven't been diagnosed as that. Is that an important thing to know?
So the question is how important to find out whether the person with gluten intolerance has celiac disease or not. If you're planning to be on a very strict gluten-free diet, then you're talking about semantics. It's not very important. So, and it depends on your position. In general, I tell my patient that it's an option. It's not a requirement. Because if we clinically can show the person is gluten intolerant, then it's a must to be on a gluten-free diet. Then it doesn't matter whether it's gluten intolerance or celiac disease, the treatment will be exactly the same. In general, patients who have full-blown celiac disease, they're slightly much more prone to lymphomas compared to patients with gluten intolerance without celiac disease. From that standpoint, it's not a bad idea to have colonoscopy and endoscopy to eliminate possibility of so-called mucosal associated or mild lymphomas, which is quite common in patients with celiac disease. Yes?
Do you find that, have you seen that people can become more sensitive as time goes on, whereas a year ago it was okay, they had a little bit, they're okay? Does that happen?
So the question is if over time people can get more sensitive to gluten. And you're talking about if you're on gluten-free diet, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, the situation is very similar to various addictive behaviors. So for example, if you have a person who drinks alcohol, right, and that person goes cold turkey, and then he or she consumes alcohol, he'll be very, very drunk after even a small amount of alcohol consumption, right? So it's the same with gluten. So your body gets cleaned from gluten, and if you consume gluten, you'll feel it. So over time, the reaction will be about the same. So, but again, you'll feel it more. And again, there's an education process, so you'll recognize the exposure to gluten much faster. Yes.
How long does it take to get the gluten out of your system?
So the question is, how long does it take to get gluten out of the system? So if you start from ground zero, right, and you want to become gluten-free, so I would say 3 or 4 months till you reach a plateau. Yes. Yeah. Yes, next question.
I'm having a hard time with, I'm trying to cut it out, but then I'll eat something and I get my symptoms again. And I don't know if it was something I just ate or if it's something I ate 6 hours ago. Like, why is it all at different times?
Well, because again, it depends on the dose which you consume of gluten, right? There's a dose effect. And there's some other things, because of the time restraints, I don't have time to discuss these things, but again, there are quite a few patients who have gluten intolerance who cannot tolerate some other products. So for example, intolerance toward dairy products are extremely common in patients with gluten intolerance. Intolerance toward soy and eggs is extremely common, and it's based on pure chemistry. There's a cross-reactivity between gliadin, which is a gluten kind of protein, and chicken, egg white protein, albumin, soy protein, and casein from cow's milk. And so, again, you need to see a physician to go through all these things, and you need to be tested for that, but all the tests are available. Sometimes you think that you're doing great on a gluten-free diet and you still have symptoms, you don't know why, maybe because you're consuming something which is cross-reacting. Yes?
Why do some patients not have a positive test when they're actually gluten intolerant?
Well, because remember that our blood work is based on antibodies, and sometimes your reaction may be cell-mediated. It's based on T lymphocytes rather than on antibodies, and so we cannot detect it because all the tests, they have their own limitations. Yes?
So if you have concern about something that has to be gluten intolerant, genetic testing, the first thing you do is blood work?
Well, genetic testing is based on the blood work. It's part of the blood work. We do almost simultaneously, we check your genes and we check presence of markers in the blood. So we do it at the same time. Because most of the labs, they combine it under one umbrella. Yes.
On the same thought, does the newest gene therapy have any effect?
The question is whether the gene therapy has any effect. Probably in the future we'll be able to destroy these genes, but so far it's not clinically available. But in the future, theoretically, it's possible, because with appropriate therapy, you can destroy the genes which makes you prone to gluten.
Why don't we stop there? How about right here? Well, there's certainly no doubt that Dr. Shipman knows his stuff. Thank you for being here tonight. Maybe if you have a few more minutes, that was a pretty robust Q&A, so if you did not get your question answered, maybe you can have a quick conversation with Dr. Shipman up front. Thank you all for coming. We have a small gift for Dr. Shipman. Thank you.